As Amazon sellers, you're gonna find a ton of products that look great at first glance, but once you dig into the data a little bit more, you're gonna see that a lot of those products aren't worth purchasing. And if you did purchase them, you're gonna notice that, maybe they didn't sell for what you thought they would, and you might have lost money on something you thought you were gonna make a bunch of profit on. My name's Alex with AC Flips, a six-figure Amazon seller. In today's video, I'm gonna review some products that look really good at first glance, but after digging into the data, might not be as solid of a product as you thought. So let's jump onto the computer, review some products, and determine if we would purchase these products for our Amazon business. All right, so I have three different products that I want to review today, and I'm gonna show you why some of these leads are gonna look really solid at first glance, but once we dig into the data, might understand that they're not as good as we thought. There'll be a couple assumptions with each product just to help us prove our point of what we're reviewing today. So the assumptions we're going to make here is that this $84.99 price is on sale on the OnCloud's website. So pretty easy to find. Wasn't a really hard product to search for if you're looking for this OnCloud brand. So that's the one assumption we're going to make here. So let's take a look at the data. We have this OnCloud shoe. It's 9.5 rock rose color. The rank is 15K, sells almost 2,000 times per month. At the current price of $151.91, which you can see that's the current buy box. We're getting this for $84.99, like I said, and we're going to make a $34 profit, 40% ROI. So already off the bat, 40% ROI on a shoe. That's kind of like our minimum of where we want to be at. So let's take a look at the Keepa data to make sure that the rest of this makes sense. So before we look at the chart itself, let's just look at the variations to make sure we have a faster seller, because that is pretty important when looking at these products. So we had that 9.5 rock rose. We can see that it's gotten some ratings in the last 90 days. So definitely sells well. It's one of the better selling variations, which is a great sign. So now we can look at the price history here. And what I'm noticing is that the price is pretty steady, but we got to make sure that we're understanding the range of what this price has been at in the past. So what we can actually do is click this close-up view button, and that's going to stretch the data out and shrink our actual y-axis here, because before it went from $0 up to 250, but if we shrink it, it goes 125 to 225 basically. So we can kind of see how much the price actually fluctuates, which is going to help us out when we're reviewing this product. So one thing I'm noticing is that the offer count was low back in December, and then that price was inflated. Once the offer count shot up again, now that price leveled out, actually dropped as low as $132, $131. So that's something we need to pay attention to, especially if we plan on selling this and it's on sale, right? So we could see that offer count going up based on the assumption that it's on sale and we're finding this profitably, and other sellers are probably finding it profitably as well. So now we can see that the offer count has dropped to levels of what it was in December, which is why our price is currently inflated to like $150, $151. But like I said, keep in mind that this buy box price was as low as $131, and then also, consistently was around that $144 price point. So that's what we want to double check, especially at our $84.99 cost here. So the other one, the bottom price was $131, which is only going to be, around a 20% ROI, which is definitely not enough for me on shoes. I've gotten burned plenty of times on shoes where I buy it expecting a 40% ROI. It tanks because of a bunch of sellers jumping on the listing. Now we're selling it at like a 15% ROI. It gets one or two returns, and then all of a sudden I'm losing, $3 to $5 per shoe. And of course, the shoes that did get returned are unsellable, so you can't even make your money back on those. So you just really want to make sure the numbers make sense when you're buying shoes. That's why we shoot for a little bit higher ROI, because if we do get burned, if we do get some returns, that we're actually still going to make money on a product like this. You got to imagine $16 profit on one shoe. If you get one return that's unfulfillable or unsellable, you're basically going to need to sell 5 more shoes to make up the profit of however much you lost on purchase of that shoe. So $85, $16 profit each. You got to sell at least 5 pairs. So that is one thing that we need to keep in mind here. So 131 is the bottom. Realistically, it might drop back down to 144. That's another price we could potentially assume. So 32% ROI, again, it's not the worst. If this is a realistic price, it's not the worst thing that we could sell the shoe at. But again, 32% ROI, you get one return, and that 32% turns to 15% or less. So a little bit risky there. I know you're going to make $27 profit, but if there was less return potential, I'd be okay taking a little bit less ROI. But because it's a shoe, especially a women's running shoes definitely, have the potential to get returned, because you want something that's comfortable if you run on it. And that's why running shoes a lot of times don't get returned in sellable condition, because someone will try them on, they'll run with them for a week and then realize that the shoe doesn't quite fit them or it's not as comfortable as they thought. So they return it. Well, obviously there's a bunch of wear on the bottom of the shoe, can't be sold in brand new condition anymore. So basically you lose out on that $84.99 unless you can resell it on eBay or something for, a discounted price. You're not going to make back all your money. But that's going to cut into our profit margin, right? So 32% on, other categories making $27 profit, like that's awesome because you get a couple of returns and all of a sudden that $27 makes up for a lot of it. But with a shoe, we want to be a little bit higher ROI to cover up some of that risk. You could look back in December and understand that, this could even keep going up if the offer count stays low, right? We've seen the price, of $165, $170 buy box before, which if you type that into our calculator here, $45 profit, 50% ROI. Now, if this was the main price, right? If this was consistently what we saw it selling for in the past, this would definitely be a buy. I would not skip this product. I would definitely, at the minimum, test buy something like this. But since our baseline is, something that's only going to make us 40% ROI, and then worst case scenario, we're only going to make like 10 to 20% ROI, there's just a little bit too much risk, even though it's a fast seller, for me to want to purchase this shoe. So for this one, I would not be purchasing this shoe. One thing I'll add, because I don't know if you saw when we were looking at the variations, we did see some higher prices here. Look at that, 167 for just the 8.5 instead of the 9.5. So, and also the 9, it doesn't have a buy box, but current price is 163. So we could look at those products, right? I'm not going to look at them for the sake of timing on the video. But if we look at those products, maybe that 167 is a consistent price. And now we've built in an extra $16 of margin that we can play with. If the offer count goes up, the prices we can afford for the price to drop before we're at those levels of not being as profitable as we want. So overall, we could look at other variations, definitely a possibility, but this specific variation is something that we're going to skip. So on to the next product. All right. So for our second product, we have these Nike mid socks that are for soccer. It's 2-pack, and we're getting this for $14.50. We're going to assume that for this price here, it wasn't super easy to find. You had to use an extra discount to get to that price. And we're selling this at $29.97, making almost $4 profit, 27% ROI. Looks like 143K rank, sells 51 times per month. So overall, the data just at first glance doesn't look amazing. But, if the price is steady, maybe it's something we want to consider. Again, only $4 profit, already starting at a pretty low ROI, but let's take a look at the Keepa data just to confirm. All right, so looking at the Keepa data, this price looks very consistent. So lucky for us, we shouldn't expect this to really tank, especially if we didn't find it, on the front page of a Nike sale. We shouldn't expect the offer count to shoot way up as well. So that $29.97 price seems to be pretty consistent. The rank has been a little bit higher in the past, right? We've seen it creep up to 400K. Looks like even recently it was up in the 300K range. We're down in the mid 150K range right now. But if we look at averages over the last 30 days, 172K rank, last 90 days, 250. So this 51 sales per month could be a little bit of a high estimate because that could be just based on 143K rank. We're just going to leave it and assume that this listing sells 50 times per month. So let's dig into this data a little bit more, because although it sells consistently at this price, that low ROI is tripping me up a little bit, but I want to be able to find a little bit more data that can either help us decide to purchase or decide not to purchase. So let's take a look at the data, the offers tab, and then the buy box statistics, just to get a little bit more information to determine if we want to purchase this or not. So what we can see here is the total sales 101. That's what Keepa is estimating. But let's debunk this number real quick because it's not something that we can trust. Basically, what is happening with these large spikes in the stock history, and that's what's going off of for sales, right? So we can see that it went from 6 sales down to 1. So Keepa counts that as 5 sales happening in one quick period. Here it went from 20 sales all the way down to 1. So 19 sales happened. That's what this number is accumulating for. So 20 down to 1, 19 sales. Happens a couple more times here if we were to zoom in. Basically what's happening there is a product is going in and out of stock through FC transfer, and Keepa just counts that as, oh, it sold 19 in 1 day. So these numbers you can't really trust. If you want to really zoom in and you can see, looks like maybe at this point, product checked in, and then we can see some actual sales happening where it's fluctuating, more regularly, looking like a actual sales happening, not an FC transfer. Maybe from 16 down to 10 could be an FC transfer, but 10 down to 8 seems reasonable. 8 down to 4 seems slightly reasonable, 4 to 3. So that's what you want to look for. Here is also another chart of consistent sales. So 44, all the way down to 30, again, all the way down to 8. So This could actually sell. One thing we do want to keep in mind is this is an FBM seller, so they control what their stock does. So they can modify their stock at any time, and Keepa is just going to relay that information. They can track sales that happen, right? But you can modify your sales at any point. So it's a little bit harder to trust FBM sellers through Keepa as well. But you can see again here, this looks like FC transfer sales happening. So did 6 sales actually happen with this seller, or was it just FC transfer? So those types of things you have to keep in mind when looking at this information. Again, I don't think that this person had 56 sales. They maybe had 10, if that. This seller maybe sold some, but it's also hard to trust because it's FBM. So 50 sales per month on this whole listing could be pretty accurate. Let's look at the buy box statistics here to see how much distribution it's getting. So an FBM seller is getting a good chunk of the buy box share, but it is also split between a bunch of other sellers, and none of them are really have a ton of reviews or anything. So, we could assume that we should be getting the buy box share at least some of the time if we're in stock and we have a good amount of stock. So no issues there. And now at this point, some of you might say, okay, this is worth purchasing. The data looks good. The buy box distribution is dispersed between a couple different sellers, so we shouldn't worry about that. But here's my rule of thumb for products like these. I have 2 instances that need to happen. They don't both have to happen at the same time, but at least one of them needs to be true for me to really want to consider the product. So if it's a high rank, it needs to have high margin. If it's got low margin, it needs to be a faster seller. So if both things are untrue, right? Like this is a slower seller and the margin isn't very high, that's kind of a red flag for me. So what I would have loved to see on a slow mover like this, is a 40% ROI, 50% ROI. So if we were getting this for $13, 42%, $5, I can afford to hold this product, only sell 5 to 10 a month, and it'd be worth it for me, right? But if we're only going to make 27% ROI, you get a return here and there because it doesn't fit, then it's like, how much profit are we actually going to make? And is it worth spending money on this type of product? All the prep work, waiting for it to sell on Amazon because it's a slow mover. So again, if it's going to be a slow mover, I want it to have high profit. And if it has low profit, it needs to sell faster. If at least one of those things are true, then it gives me a higher likelihood of me wanting to purchase. If both those things are false, then I'm probably not going to purchase. So unfortunately, a little bit slower mover, doesn't have a high margin, so I will not be purchasing this product. All right, for our last product, we have this Milwaukee screwdriver set. Sells for $42.99. We're getting this for $19.38. And keep in mind, we're assuming that we found this on sale and it was very easy to find, right? Very easy to find. It was on Milwaukee's homepage on sale, so everyone can see it, right? So $19.38. Now the tools and home improvement category just has less competition than say the health and household or the clothing category. So another thing to keep in mind, but this one was pretty easy to find for me. And let's take a look at the rest of the data. So 25K rank. In any category, most categories, that's pretty good. SellerAmp says it's estimating 300 sales per month, which is pretty good. It's not a variation listing, so all the sales are going to this specific product. We're selling this for $42.98. We're going to make almost $850 profit on this and a 43% ROI. Now, overall, that looks pretty awesome. Let's take a look at the chart to make sure that everything makes sense, but overall looks pretty good so far. Okay, so the chart is very interesting, right? So historically, in the last 3 months, we saw this price pretty consistently at like this $34, $35 range. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the sellers are starting to sell out. We're down to 10 sellers on this listing, and the price is all the way up to $42.99. We see some FBA sellers all the way up at $48.90. So that could really boost our sales, right? We could see this being, a 60, 70% ROI if we're able to get sales at $48.90. When you see charts like this, you're going to notice things with the offer count. And because it's super easy to find, we just have to expect that this offer count is going to start going back up in the near future, especially by the time we list it. And I'm not one to buy something and try to list it FBM right away to try to, beat the tank. I'm going to send stuff FBA. I'm going to send it to my prep center because that's the process that works great for me. So if it doesn't meet my criteria, I'm not sending it to the prep center. I'm not going to sell it FBA because it's probably, not going to work for me. So this is one of those products that might fit that bill. So let's actually zoom out a little bit and see if there are any other fluctuations like this in the offer count and see what the price does. Okay, so we can see offer count has been low in the past, and that price was up at that, $45, $47 range. So that's a good sign, right? Historically, when the offer count's this low, we see the price really high like that. But what happens is another sale probably happened right around the beginning of November. All of a sudden, the offer count shot way up in less than a month, and then that price dropped all the way down to $36, right? Within a couple weeks, the price went from 47 all the way down to 35. So over a $12 drop. So if this was at 35, like we saw, we're barely breaking even on a product like this. Now, maybe this tool set doesn't get returned very often, but only making $1.60 at a reasonable price, compared to, the best you can do here, the most we'll make is 43% ROI. Now, again, if maybe the offer count keeps going down for a little bit, but then starts to creep back up, like best case scenario, we're going to make $12, 65% ROI. But currently selling at $42.99, so we got to keep that in mind. And historically, even though the price has been this high in the past, right? It's not unreasonable to think, oh, $42.99, we've never seen that before. We have seen that before. It's been up to $47 pretty consistently for at least a month, right? All of October, this was a pretty solid price and a pretty good product to be purchasing if you were finding it profitably then. Probably went on sale right around the beginning of November, and all of a sudden a bunch of people found it, just like we could have the same situation where, like I said, this was really easy to find on sale right now. So what we should expect is that something similar like this could happen. So because it's easy to find and it's selling profitably now, we should expect a decent amount of sellers to jump back on. So if it gets up near 30 sellers again, we can probably expect this price to be at, $35. And if it goes even lower, we did see as low as like $32, and now we're going to be losing money on this type of product. So for me, the risk is just too high with that inflated price. Although some people might buy, some people might make money at the beginning, but once we see that offer count creep up and your product starts to check in depending on how much you bought, right? Now everyone's going to be lowering their price to try to get more sales because everybody bought a ton because it was on sale. So just a little bit too risky for me, which is why I'm not going to be purchasing. Again, we're making good profit. It sells fairly quickly, but the chart just doesn't look good enough for me to want to purchase. All right, so hopefully you guys learned some things from my breakdown of these products, because a lot of them looked great at first glance. And if you're not understanding product research correctly, you probably would have bought all 3 of these and then lost money on probably all of them. So understanding the product research side, how to analyze charts, how to analyze sales history is going to really help you make smart purchases for your Amazon business. If you guys found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate you subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.